Hey, what's going on? My name's Vit, and in this video we're going to be talking all about Dawntrail's MSQ and my thoughts and feelings. This is going to be a bit of a rant, a bit of a ramble about just my opinions of this journey, we'll call it. And spoiler alert, it's not a great opinion. It's fairly negative. So, and when I say fairly, I mean very. So if you don't want to hear that, if you're in love with this story and don't want to hear any negative criticisms, click off this video now because it's going to go downhill quickly. I'm going to try to be fair. I've given this a lot of time. I finished the story, I believe, about a little over two weeks ago, maybe 2.5 weeks ago. And since then, I've been watching a bunch of other people stream this game, stream the story, the MSQ. Getting, you know, outside opinions, talking to a bunch of people, talking to my community, hanging out in other communities as well, and just trying to get a sense for how people feel about this and how I feel about it personally. And I think I've finally gotten to a spot where, you know, I'm not rushing into this video, and I've really come to terms with this story and my feelings about it. And man, it's not good. I hate to make this video. I'm honestly just so disappointed with how Dawntrail's MSQ turned out. And that's not to say that I necessarily hate the story or the characters. I have my complaints, obviously, but I feel like so much of it comes from the MSQ and the structure of how Final Fantasy XIV presents its story and how it tells its story, and how it treats its characters, and how it treats your time as a player. It's just not fun. It's a miserable slog. And so much of that comes from talking to 3 NPCs, talking to Urqopacha, talk to 3 NPCs, talk to Urqopacha, do a follow quest, do a stealth quest that's somehow worse than PS1 era stealth games. It's like, oh my god, what am I playing here? It took me about 40 hours, start to finish. I did it all on stream to get through the MSQ from the first quest till the credits rolled, and I wish I could get those 40 hours back. I sound like I'm being really harsh here, but man, this was my least favorite story and MSQ experience ever in Final Fantasy XIV. I feel like this had the worst pacing any piece of media I've ever experienced has had. Like, if you can point me to something that has worse pacing than Final Fantasy Dawntrail, please post it in the comments. I don't know what it is. I can't think of anything that has worse pacing than this. I'm sorry. I'm like going into the deep end here. Man, this is going to be such a rant. This video was something that I didn't want to make. It's something that I've been thinking about. I've put a lot of thought into it, and I've finally come to terms with it. When I was going through this MSQ, I was coping hard. I wanted this to be so good, and it's a shame because they've really set up the story to be incredible. Like, everything pre-Dawntrail for me, I think Final Fantasy XIV has the best video game story of all time. I'm not one to get emotional about stories or anything, but like so many times in Dawntrail, not in Dawntrail, sorry, in Endwalker, like I actually cried in Endwalker. Like I'm sure many other people did. Dawntrail, I felt absolutely nothing. Like I just wanted it over with, and it's a shame because they set such a high bar with this game, and it just completely fell flat in Dawntrail. So I don't know. At the end of the MSQ, my initial impression was a 4 out of 10. And upon further reflection, upon watching other people go through it, point out even more problems that I didn't pick up on with my first time through, I was, like I said, I was coping on my playthrough. Like, I was thinking, like, it's not that bad. It's, you know, it gets better. It's gonna get better. We hit the credits. It's not terrible. It's fine. And no, it's not. Oh man, we're gonna get into all of it. We're gonna go zone by zone, talk about my thoughts about everything. I have some, you know, general complaints. I don't want to make any like big blanket statements at the front of this video, despite what I've already said. But we'll talk about everything. And I think my overall impression after, you know, these 3 weeks, letting like letting it ruminate a bit, and me coming to terms with everything, I think my overall rating of the story and the MSQ goes down to like a 3 out of 10. It's rough. I don't want to make this video. Man, but I've been seeing a lot of the same sentiments from the community, and a lot of people share the same opinions, so I want to put this out there. I want to hold this game to a higher standard, and I think it's worth talking about. So let's jump into it. We're going to go zone by zone and start getting into some of this stuff. Alright, so before we get into it all, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the positives. It's not all bad. I've been having a ton of fun with Dawntrail since it launched. Like, I gave those ratings, and those were strictly for the MSQ and the story. Now, if I had to give a rating for the expansion as a whole, I'm going like 9 out of 10. I think it loses a point because it stole 40 hours of my time for the MSQ, but that's over and done with. Now I actually can play the game and enjoy my time here, and everything else has been impeccable. The zones, the music, the graphics updates, the improved lighting, the new jobs. I've only really played Pictomancer. I haven't really touched Viper yet myself, but I've only heard good things about it. Some of the job changes are maybe a little iffy at level 100, but you know, that's stuff that can be changed in the future. We'll see what, you know, job changes come down the line, maybe with Savage in another week or so. What else? Yeah, like, all the combat has been incredible. The dungeons, the trials, the normal raids that just came out. I've been having, like, so much fun with everything. I've been farming out the extreme trials. Those have been top-notch stuff. Like, all of the actual gameplay is so much better than Endwalker was so far. And that's the stuff that actually matters to me. So don't let my negative impressions of the story dissuade you if you are on the fence about playing this. Like, the game itself has been an absolute blast. It's like a 9 or a 10 out of 10. It's just like that 40 hours of story. Like, man, if like one of my personal friends came up to me and said, should I play Dawntrail? I would say, yeah, you should, but you should skip the story. And I'm not a story skipper, and if it weren't for this YouTube channel, I probably would be. I feel like I should just stay more in the loop at this point and, you know, keep up to date on what's happening in this game, and that involves the story, and for better or worse, I guess, but everything else has been so good. Like, as soon as you start the MSQ, you're thrown into Tuliyollal here, the main hub city, and this place is great. It captures the vibe. It is that beach town. Man, it's just good. Like, I have absolutely no complaints about Tuliyollal. Again, the zones are all so good, but it's the MSQ and the pacing and the story that comes from within them that is my main complaint. We were kind of also promised like a fun beach vacation. This is the only beach in the in the expansion here. We had like one quest here where Fonjantain is like crying to himself, and that was the extent of our time at the beach. So yeah, there was a bit of a misdirection in some of the marketing, in my opinion. We were also kind of promised like a competition against the other Scions, and man, they were just not in the story. It hurts me to say it, but the Scions were not here. They were here in spirit, they were here in some cutscenes. They had no meaningful impact on literally anything. Kryl was featured towards the end. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but yeah, I don't know. There wasn't a whole lot going on in Tuliyollal at the start. It just kind of set things up. It kind of set the expectations for what we were going to be doing, setting up the competition between Wuk-Lamat, introducing her brothers, between Bakul, Zarul, and Koana. You know, I have my complaints about all the characters in this game. I really do. But yeah, I don't know. We got off on the right foot, I think. Like, we got set off on the right foot, where we were here learning about some of the history, learning about some of the backstory to what's actually going on here. And, you know, just meeting some of the characters before we set out. And I think at that point we had jumped out of Tuliyollal here and immediately went out to Urqopacha. I think you had the option to go to Urqopacha or the other zone. I went here first, though, and I think it was the better decision. Urqopacha, this zone was awesome. I loved this place. This was a great initial start to the story. You come here, and you only have access to, like, the first half of the map. You come back to the second half later. I believe around the 93 level quests. And honestly, like, this captures the vibe of what I was expecting out of this expansion. You're just hanging out in, like, a South American civilization up here, talking to the Pelu Pelu. And their alpacas, their mezcal. This was like a fun starting point. It was very fetch questy, but it's the first zone. Like, you're not even the first level into it at this point, and you know, it was fitting. This was a fun start to the journey, and unfortunately, nothing really changed in terms of the structure of the MSQ after this point. So, man, the whole first half of the MSQ is just fetch quest city. Like, it felt fine in this initial zone, but afterwards, it just drug out. I really liked the alpaca. I liked these Pelu Pelu merchants. Yeah, honestly, I have, like, absolutely no complaints about this section of the story. Started off great, and was a fun little romp out here, trading items for mezcal. Trading it for, I believe it was the alpaca saddle at the end of that quest chain. And yeah, I don't know. I have a certain fondness for this type of area. I actually spent some time down in Ecuador in real life, doing some travel, and got to hang out with some real life alpacas, some wild ones up in the mountains, and this just brings back really fond memories for me of some time spent traveling with my dad. And yeah, I don't know. This was just a great start to the story. There's not much else to say about this. I think this was just like the level 90, 91 story, and then we moved on from here. But it was a really good starting off on the right foot. Alright, next up in the story, level 91, 92-ish, we come over to Kozama'uka. Again, I believe you could come here first if you wanted to. I'm glad I came here second. But this is where I kind of started hitting a wall already at level 91, level 92. The fetch quests were already just getting too old. Like, man, that's all we did in the first zone, and now we're doing it again in the second zone. Again, either one of these could be the first zone, so I guess it makes sense. This is something they've done in the past, but there's just really nothing happening here. We're basically just going around repairing a float for a festival, and it's just not interesting in my opinion. It's nice to meet the community here, the civilization that lives here, but unfortunately for me, it's just reskins of old Heavensward characters. You know, it's the Hanu Hanu and the goblins. The Hanu Hanu or the Vanu Vanu, one of the two. I forget which is which from which expansion. But again, this is like a beautiful zone. It's just, there's nothing going on here. You're like trying to help them grow some crops, I guess. I mean, you're also going through the contest with, you know, all of Urqopacha's siblings. We haven't even talked about Urqopacha yet. We will get to that later. I know that is a very hot topic and one of the main reasons why people are unhappy, but yeah, I don't know. I wasn't thrilled with the story here. It was just kind of boring to me. It was nice meeting the people of this area, but I don't know. It just kind of felt like a guided tour where they hold your hand the whole way and Urqopacha goes around talking to people. Again, this place is absolutely stunning. Like, it looks insane now that I'm flying around and getting another look at it. All these trees, the waterfalls, like, the scenery here is, like, actually next level. This expansion looks so beautiful once you take the time to stop and actually take a look at it, but man, there was just nothing here. This was when this was at this point in the contest, we were kind of at odds with Bakul, and he was just being a real jerk at this point. I absolutely hated his character. He's, you know, going around like threatening to kill, like to murder people from these civilizations. He's attempting to murder people. He is kidnapping Wukalamat. We're having to track him down, perform stealth quests to ascertain his location, and it's just not fun. It's not what I wanted to be doing at the start of the game. Again, it's very early questing, so I gave it a pass. It's fine. Exploring this area was very fun, but a lot of the story that went along with it was not. It really... The story with Bakul really soured his character for me. And, yeah, I don't know. Hanging out with the goblins here in Earthenshire was, I've had my fill of the goblins, to say the least, in Heaven's Word. And that was not something that I was looking to come back to. Cool little town, but, yeah, I don't know. They make crafts. End of story. Okay, moving on. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't get a whole lot out of here, but again, I give it a pass because the zone was so nice, and we're very early on. Surely things are going to get better from here on out, and we'll see where it goes, but yeah. There's not much to say about this place. It was helping the Vanu grow their crops and helping the goblins get help to make crafts, and yeah. That's that. Fetch quests yet again. Okay, now at this point in the story, somewhere around level 93, we come up to the higher altitude back in Urqopacha, and we meet the giants. And I actually really like these guys. I loved their culture, their approach to life and death and afterlife and remembering their loved ones. And I don't know, I thought their story was, you know, the most meaningful thing that we had encountered up until this point. And this whole zone is just really pretty epic up here at such high altitudes. I don't know, I just really liked this whole zone. I liked their story. And at this point, if Bakul hadn't shown his incompetence enough in the last zone, he certainly did here when he released Valigarmanda. Like, he is completely incompetent, he's not fit to rule, and now he's literally just a complete terrorist, and releases this creature that, you know, brings grave wounds upon the giants and their civilization here, and, like, man, he is just the most unlikable character imaginable at this point in the story. And obviously that's what they're going for. Like, they want you to dislike him. He is like a cartoonishly evil villain. It sets you up to think like, okay, we're gonna have some like epic battle with him at some point. And, you know, we'll get to that later, but man, it was just so over the top. Like, how is he this stupid and this bad and like predictable and poorly written? I can go on, but his character was so bad for me. Like, it just didn't do it. And it really struck home, like, how are we even competing against this guy? Like, how is he in the running if he's committing such atrocities as releasing Valigarmanda out into the world? It just didn't make any sense. Like, the story was so nonsensical at this point. Like, how is he permitted into this contest with us? Like, how is he a competitor? Man, I don't know. It was just starting to lose me at this point. Even though the zone was great, the giants were great. The level 93 dungeon in this zone, where you go up to the summit here and learn about the giants' ancestors and the grave sites up there, like, that was all really, really interesting, actually. And then we get the first trial against Valigarmanda, which was excellent. We're actually getting some fun battle content at this point, because that's something I haven't mentioned yet. This game, or this expansion, the MSQ, has so little gameplay in it. It's just a visual novel at this point. Like, again, I think it took me 40 hours to get through the entirety of the MSQ. There's 6 dungeons, there's 3 trials, and I believe maybe 4 solo duties, like solo instances. There might be 5 hours of gameplay in the MSQ, if we're being generous. That's assuming you go into the dungeons and like wipe to all of them and, you know, take 30 minutes to get through everything. It's, the amount of gameplay, or the lack of gameplay, is kind of staggering. Like, that is one of my chief concerns with the pacing of Dawntrail, is just that I'm here to play a video game, not to read a book. Maybe that's a hot take, like, that's how it's always been, but it felt worse, this expansion. Like, there was so little to do. There were so few instances, so few solo duties, so few quests where you just have to go out and kill mobs in the overworld. Like, I think we killed a fire sprite here at some point when we were searching for Valigarmanda. And that was some of the most engaging overworld combat that we got, I guess, throughout the entire expansion. It's just, like, there's nothing, man. It was staggering how little gameplay there was. This whole zone right here is beautiful, by the way. We were here for all of 5 minutes. Yeah, I don't know. I've come here for a couple of fates after in the end game, but hey, look, a lookout point. Let me grab this while we're here. But yeah, I don't know. There's not much else to say about this zone. It was fun. This was one of the better ones, but I think Bakul really got started on the wrong foot and only went downhill in this zone. He is literally like a war criminal at this point. He has caused harm to the giants in their homeland. He's threatened to murder countless individuals. A couple, maybe not countless, but there were a few instances of him literally trying to murder people. And I don't know how he's even still in the running at this point, so yeah, that's my thoughts on this so far in this zone. Alright, next up, somewhere around level 94, we find ourselves here. I believe it's called Yak T'el. Yeah, in Yak T'el, somewhere around level 94, and this zone had potential to be really interesting, but I feel like they just dropped the ball completely. We come here to find another keystone in our attempts to win the contest, and it just has us going around and, you know, trying to make a local delicacy in the form of some type of taco-like meal. It throws us into this, like, cooking contest, which, whatever, it's kind of fun. It's, you know, nothing too serious. We're just going around, still having fun, doing some fetch quest type stuff. But the one thing that didn't really sit very well with me here is that we found out, I guess it's time to talk about Urqopacha, because we found her biological father, and earlier in the story it was obvious that she had been adopted by Galul Jaja, and we just kind of stumble into her biological father here. We discover the truth that he is her biological father, but she, for whatever reason, doesn't care, and we just kind of ignore him and go about our day and move on like it never happened. That seems like a pretty big detail, especially when Urqopacha is all about family, all about making peace with everybody, all about being friends with every last person she runs into, and apparently not her biological father, though. She could care less about him. That's the impression I got, at least. There's so many weird details in this story that are, like, really interesting plot points, right? Like, they're interesting story moments, but they're just executed so poorly where they leave so much to your imagination to fill in the gaps. Like, so much of the screen time in this zone was spent making tacos, or whatever they were, where, like, they just leave the rest of it to your imagination to fill in the gaps of the stuff that's actually important, like Urqopacha's biological father and, you know, their relationship and what that all means. And it's just not fleshed out in any sense. Like, we have a short conversation with him before moving on. Yeah, and was she kidnapped again here? Was that what happened? I think so. And at the end of it, we had a solo instance against Bakul, where we have to fight him as Urqopacha, and that was fun. That was, I believe, one of the first instanced duties. We had another one where we fought Golul, Jaja, her father. And again, the instance duties are great. Don't get me wrong, like they were all very well done. They were all very fun. They were just too few and far between. Like, we didn't have enough of them. Again, this zone is beautiful. It was just padding, though. Like, this was just filler. At the end of the day, they didn't flesh out the actual important story beats that came to light here with Urqopacha's father, and I guess it's time to talk about Urqopacha. A lot of people really don't like her. I started out really liking her. At the start of the story, I thought she was great. She was fun. At the end of Endwalker, she was set up in a very fun way where she was just this goofy, lovable character, and she just very quickly became incredibly overbearing in the course of the story in Dawntrail. There's nothing about her character that I inherently hate. Like, she's fine. I think we just had way too much of her. One of the other common complaints is that, like, oh, you just don't like the story because you're not the main character. She's the main character. And, like, sure, that's a valid criticism that people may have, because she is the main character. Like, our character does not need to be here in the story. You could be playing this entire story as Urqopacha and it would be just fine. Some people say, like, oh, but we're here mentoring her, but we don't really teach her anything. We don't really lend any insight. There's not much mentoring that we do. We're just kind of along for the ride. We watch her make some dumb mistakes and don't really step in to help in many ways. Yeah, I don't know. A lot of our time spent with Urqopacha could have been an email. It's very phoned in on our part as the Warrior of Light. I get that the story doesn't need to be about us, and I don't think it does. Like, I'm not upset that she's the main character. I'm upset that we just play absolutely no part in backing her up in her story development. Like, man, there's just there's so much to say about her. It's so much that people dislike and complain about with her. I really don't get a lot of it. Like, she was okay to me for most of the story. She didn't really grate on me until the very end when we had to speak with her for like the millionth time. At this point in the story, she was still kind of fine for me. Like, she was just a goofy character. She fit in with the rest of the story. I was not taking anything seriously at this point, so I wasn't taking her seriously either. It was just kind of a fun romp through the story. She's very lighthearted, very Disney. It was clear that they were writing this in a sense that was, I want to say, for children. That's the best way I can put it. And that doesn't necessarily need to be a negative, but I think it was written in a way that was just poorly executed and had no depth to it. Like, you can write for children, write in a Disney fashion, and still, you know, put in clues that, you know, have deeper meaning. But I don't think they did that in any way, shape, or form. So, yeah, I don't know. We have a cooking contest. We ignore her biological father. We learn that the other Mamul Ja who live in the lower area in this zone down in Mamook are just, you know, slightly xenophobic. They live in their own bubble. They want nothing to do with anybody who's outside their civilization. And this is a fairly interesting story beat down here, actually. long story short, we make our way to the Sky Deep Cenote, which is the dungeon in this area, and we find that all of the Mamoolja who live here are desperately trying to breed two-headed Mamoolja at the expense of their children. I believe if I'm getting my facts straight here, it was like a 1 in 100 chance of every child that is conceived, like only 1 in 100 lives because of the way that they're trying to conceive of these dual two-headed Mamoolja. So they have such a high mortality rate in their children, and it takes a really dark turn. And it's implied that, I say implied, it's directly fed to us that this is why Bakul behaves the way that he does, because he has so much generational trauma from this zone, from the way that his civilization behaves, and, you know, I don't know. It set us up to just feel really bad for him, but I just didn't. I don't know. Like, it's obviously tragic what they were doing here, what happened to his people, but at the same time, like, man, I just didn't feel for him. He's just such an idiot that, like, they expected to flip a light switch and have us feel bad for him, and it just didn't land. Like, I felt bad for his people, but it didn't do it for him. It didn't do it for me when it came to him. It didn't redeem him. It just, like, made me think, like, okay, this civilization is horrible. Like, they're doing horrible things down here. And, like, we solve all of their problems by bringing some seeds from Charlian to help them grow crops down here where they otherwise couldn't, but apparently, you know, they had fine growing conditions anyway. They just needed the proper seeds or whatever. It's just so contrived. I don't know. It was a pretty heartfelt, meaningful part of the story, but at the same time, man, it just didn't land for me. Bakul Jaja was not redeemed in any sense just because he has some trauma. Obviously, he was feeling the pressure to live up to the standards that his society had set for him because he is one of those two-headed Mamoolja that they tried so hard and sacrificed so much to achieve, but he wasn't living up to their standards, so he's just an idiot and behaving horribly to try to do everything he could to meet those standards, but yeah, I don't know. He was just going about it in the wrong way, and it made me dislike him. I disliked his character, and maybe that's just a personal thing. Maybe you connected with him. Maybe I missed something here, but it was just not... It's just another instance where it was not executed well. I don't think his character was done well, and that's the end of story, really. The dungeon was very, very well done. They really drove home the part that, you know, they're committing atrocities down here. Like, this civilization has been stuck in their ways for so long, and things are just so horrible for them, but that does not redeem the way that he was acting, that Bakul was acting. It does not make him any more fit to be a ruler. We've got another solo instance down here where we fight the ghost of Golul Jaja, their father, and that was cool. We had a really awesome moment with Koana where he basically sacrificed his chances at winning in the Rite of Succession, where he threw his keystone up into the air and shot it with his gun. That was, he's a real bro for that. Like, he is one of the best characters in this expansion, and that moment just really solidified it. But outside of that, yeah, I don't know. We solved racism by planting some seeds here, and yeah, it's just not fleshed out enough, in my opinion. Yet again, just another instance where we were kind of let down by the writing and the execution. I think the story beats here were really well thought out. Like, they have some really good concepts throughout this story in Dawntrail. It's just so poorly executed, and it's, you know, run here, go do a fetch quest, go talk to 3 NPCs in town, go do another fetch quest, go talk to Urqopacha, and repeat. And that's the entirety of the entire story. And that does not change. We are at the halfway point here. This was, I believe this was the last trial in the Rite of Succession from this zone where we had to fight that spirit, Galul Jaja. And, you know, we came out on top in the end, and Urqopacha became Dawn Servant. I have so many other, like, little nitpicky minor complaints about the whole thing, but, you know, it was fine. It took half of the MSQ to get to this point, and I think it should have been done in the first 3 levels, if we're being honest. It's like we're level 95 by the end of this zone down here in Mamook, and man, it just dragged on way too much, in my opinion. The pacing was just not there. Again, it brings me back to my main concern, which is the pacing, and Dawntrail just shot itself in the foot with all of the tedious MMO questing, all of the talking to NPCs, all of the cutscenes that are just your character sitting there nodding their head, punching their fist into their hand, nodding in agreement. The cutscenes just pan to every single NPC. It just feels like it's wasting your time, and I just feel like Final Fantasy needs to do something about the format of their MSQ, because I am so done with it. Like, after Endwalker, like, these things were always an issue. This was always a problem, but there were so many more stakes involved. There was so much more on the line. The story was so much more interesting that we put up with it. But here in Dawntrail, like, we're getting a fresh start. There are lower stakes here than there were in A Realm Reborn. Like, A Realm Reborn threw us immediately into, like, first cutscene, hey, here's Hydaelyn, by the way. Hey, here are some Ascians. Like, here are the primals that are being tempered by all these civilizations. Here's Ultima. Like, A Realm Reborn had more going on for it than Dawntrail did, and that's saying something. Again, I played A Realm Reborn in the modern era, where a lot of the quests had been trimmed down, so there was less filler. But up until this point in Dawntrail, like, pretty much everything has just felt like filler. They haven't set up anything. They've set up Urqopacha as the Dawn Servant at this point. She is, you know, inducted in as the Dawn Servant. She brings on Koana with her back in Tuliyollal, and it's okay. It's fine. Like, that was a nice little scene where she gave a speech. I have my complaints about some of the audio work with the voice acting and the direction and some of the sound design. Like, when she's up there giving her speech and it sounds like she's just talking in a quiet room, like, man, I don't know. That stuff, that's all nitpicking. Like, it's fine. I'm not going to get into all that, but yeah, I don't know. Up until this point, we are done with the Dawn Servant arc, with the Rite of Succession, and there were no surprises along the way. It was very predictable, very cut and dry. Urqopacha is such a one-note character. All of the other characters are kind of one-note as well. Bakul is just such a one-note villain. Obviously, we get a bit more backstory here, but it doesn't change my thoughts on him in any sense. It doesn't redeem him. He does nothing to redeem himself. So I still just don't like him as a character. Nothing here changed how I felt about him from the previous 15 hours of story. It's like they just flipped a light switch with the twist in this zone and expected us to like him after that, and I just had no reason to. I don't know. It didn't land for me. I know a lot of people like him, but I just straight up don't see any single reason to, other than the fact that he is traumatized and held to these high standards and feels the need to live up to them. But yeah, it doesn't give him an excuse to be such a horrible person and a literal terrorist. We can't forget that. He is a terrorist. So yeah, we're just gonna ignore that now moving forward. So forget all that happened. We're just gonna, you know, push that behind us, push under the rug that he unleashed Valigarmanda out onto the world, which, you know, threatened to kill everybody, but it's fine. He had some trauma, so we'll ignore it. So, yeah, moving on. Next zone. Alright, last thing I forgot to mention about the previous zone back in Yak T'el, down in Mamook. Was it there? Where was it? Yeah, I guess it was there. When we actually we went through the Sky Deep Sea Note and found the entrance to the City of Gold. We had the key to go in, but I mean, I forgot about it because the writers apparently did too. They were just like, all right, well, we found it. Well, basically the whole reason we're here in Tuliyollal, looking for the City of Gold, and we're just gonna ignore that. Yeah, we'll come back later. We're literally at the gate. We have the key in our hand, but we're not gonna go in. We're not even gonna look at it. We're gonna go back to Tuliyollal, and oh man, yes, it makes sense. Urqopacha goes back to be the Dawn Servant, get all situated first. And yeah, we end up losing the access to that place anyway, but oh man, it's like we found the City of Gold, we're right at the front door, and it's just ripped away from us. That was a bit painful. Little side note, it felt just like a weird order to do things in, like why would they show that to us and then immediately take it away? It felt a little bad, but wasn't the end of the world. But yeah, after Urqopacha is set up as Dawn Servant, we come out here into Shaluani with Erinville, seemingly past the Rite of Succession, past that arc. We've moved on. We're going on a new adventure up into the northern continent of Tuliyollal. And honestly, this is such a good zone. Like, I love this place. The story, much less so. Basically nothing happened here. But, yeah, it's Wild West Town. It's awesome. I've got my motorcycle mount. I'm out here riding around, and I just love this place. It's just a barren desert, don't get me wrong, but, it's just a nice change of scenery for this game. The music's awesome. It's such a good zone. You've even got the more, like, Native American-looking part of the zone up this way, up by the lake. They're very clearly going for, like, a North American influence here, if it's not obvious. And, man, there's, when you're going through the quests in this zone, I cannot stand the voice acting. I'm sorry, but they have such, like, an anime protagonist voice to them, all of the American accents. You'd think they would have, like, cowboy accents down in the Wild West town. There's, like, maybe one guy who does, but they're all machinists with their cowboy outfits on. They're literally having shootouts in the street. And nobody's got at all, like, any type of accent. They are just, like, the most clean-cut American accents you've ever heard in your life. It's just so out of place. Like, the voice acting's fine, but the voice direction is so strange. Like, just some of the decisions that were made, like if you're gonna go to this extent to make, like, an old-fashioned Wild West town, like, at least fit the stereotype and give them the accents too. Like, I was just so taken out by that. Like, my immersion was completely broken as soon as the characters started talking here. And I feel like that's a lot of my complaints for Dawntrail. It's like, some of the stuff is just so ridiculous, the pacing is so bad, and it literally just breaks your immersion. Like, some of the decisions that were made, some of the questing, like, it's just, it takes you out of the world. Like, so much of it's just completely nonsensical. Like, we have a shootout in the street at the end of this zone, and the cowboys are saying that they're using I don't know if you want to call them cowboys. They're not exactly cowboys. The outlaws, the bandits, whatever you want to call them. They're using rubber bullets. Like, it's just so stupid. Like, we go from, like, literally dead children in the last zone to a cowboy shootout with rubber bullets. Like, it just makes no sense. Like, some of these decisions that were made, like, I don't know. I feel like there were better ways to go around, like, you know, not fatally killing the guy with a gun, but rubber bullets was not on my bingo card, that's for sure. The rest of the story in this zone was just so... man, it's the most filler of all filler. The Wild West town there is cool. We come up here and start to try to solve the bandit mystery where, it was so predictable. As soon as we saw was it the deputy? Like, I immediately knew he was the bad guy, the leader of the bandits, like... And then the rest of this time was just spent doing fetch quests. You literally have to go around picking up pterodactyls, I think they were pterodactyls, like literal pterodactyl dung. And there was a whole quest, go pick up 3 piles of dung, whatever. It's literally the same quest that we've been doing for the rest of the story, where you go to a town and talk to 3 people. Picking up 3 piles of dung is no different, it's the same quest. So, you know, picking up 3 piles of crap is par for the course at this point. I was not surprised by that. I honestly had more fun picking up 3 piles of pterodactyl crap than I did talking to 3 NPCs in town, so there's that. That was a step up from talking to 3 NPCs, at least. From talking to Urqopacha, I'd rather be picking up poop. Out in the overworld, at least you have to go look for it. But yeah, there was absolutely no substance to the bandits. It was incredibly predictable. Their story was just pointless. There was literally no reason for it other than Erenville passes through here and, you know, this is where he came from, I guess. Erenville has had no character development up until this point. He doesn't get any until the end of story at all. He doesn't get any at all, not even up until the end of the story. It's like, throughout the MSQ, he just has no character development. Erenville is still the same as he ever was. Yeah, it's unfortunate because, you know, you'd think they would have expanded on him. We have the whole scene here with the train. You know, this dome shows up off in the distance. And I guess we do take a bit of a diversion before we make the train back to Tuliyollal, where the whole town is invaded by future sci-fi space invaders, I guess. There's like a whole galactic federation that flies in and invades Tuliyollal. And it's unfortunate because that's all just done through a cutscene, where in past expansions that would have been done via a solo instance duty. You would have had to go through and, you know, fight them off and help the town. But no, in Dawntrail you just sit and watch and can't do anything about it. Urqopacha tries to no avail to help, and it ends up being Tuliyollal, her brother, who had gone into the dome here and come back out with a 30-year time skip, apparently. He came back out with a bunch of future tech, went back, invaded Tuliyollal for some reason, with very little motives, other than I need to be the most powerful, and killed his father. And we stood around watching as that happened. Didn't make any effort on the premise of, you know, letting him fight with honor, letting him die with honor, even though Tuliyollal is not showing any honor from his side of things. So it was incredibly frustrating not being able to play that whole scene out, having to watch one of the best characters in Tuliyollal be murdered in front of us by Tuliyollal, who has been very inconsequential up until this point, and, you know, all of a sudden now just has a bunch of this future tech power and comes back and kills his old man, and it just wasn't very impactful. It wasn't well done, in my opinion. And now we've got to figure out how to get back into this dome after Zerul Ja retreats back in there and says, hey, come find me, come fight me. And, you know, we build a big train here, a la Shadowbringers. They're like, hey, you remember that part of Shadowbringers where you built a trolley? Probably the worst part of Shadowbringers. Hey, what if we did that again? You remember that? That was cute, right? That'd be fun. Reference what's arguably the least interesting part of Shadowbringers. Remember how good Shadowbringers was? Hey, here's a little taste of that. So, we build up a train. We get a big grand montage of building the train with some Disney theme song playing in the background that is incredibly out of place. It's meant to be inspiring and rallying the troops, but it just feels off, to say the least. The song that's playing doesn't make any sense. So, then we take that big train and ram it through the tunnel here into their base of operations, and we get a little cutscene, I guess. This is another massive missed opportunity for a solo instance, and one of the more frustrating parts of the story where we should really be fighting during that scene. There should be maybe a rail shooter where we are on the train, on the turrets that we have installed, fighting off the flying troops that are coming to assault the train, but no, we literally just have to watch a cutscene where Graha is slow motion jumping from one train car to another in a very predictable and uninspired fashion. I hated this zone. I hated the story here. It was terrible. There's nothing else to say about it. It was so poorly executed. This zone had so much potential. The voice acting, the voice direction, I should say. The voice acting was fine. It's just the direction of who they chose and the direction that they were given to voice the lines here made no sense. The story made no sense. The train sequence was robbed from us from actually getting any meaningful gameplay in this story for once. And it was just bad. That's all there is to really say about it. And it's a shame because this zone had so much potential. It's so cool looking. It's such a nice change of pace. But at least now I can ride my chopper around here and take in the scenery, I guess. Alright, now after that whole train sequence, we find ourselves at Vanguard, the level 97 dungeon, which is probably the best piece of, like, actual content that we've gotten up until this point. Only took until level 97, of course. We had a bunch of other good dungeons as well. All the dungeons, the other 3 beforehand, were very good as well, but this one was definitely the highlight for me. But after going through that dungeon, breaking through the barrier into this, into the dome, we find ourselves here in Heritage Found, which is a extremely nice change of pace because it feels like this is where the story is actually going to pick up, right? We're in this crazy new dimension. I don't remember if we knew it was a new dimension or not yet at this point, but either way it is. It ends up being a little pocket dimension that we're in here. And what do we do when we get here? We are here to seek vengeance for Tuliyollal, which was just invaded. All of our citizens, many of our citizens, were just killed by the invasion, by the invading troops. We get here, we immediately meet with the ruler of this dimension, I guess, Queen Sphene. And what do? We go on a tour of the crops. Tell me in what world this makes sense. It's level 97 MSQ. Level 97. We've been through 97 levels. And we're going around talking to 3 farmers, learning about their crops, and their high-tech sprinklers, and their high-tech storage vault, and their high-tech animal pen. And who cares? Not me. I was so taken out of the story at this point because there are so many stakes at this point. Like, we are literally here to kill Zoraal-Ja, fight for vengeance for Tuliyollal, get revenge for what he just did. And we're here learning about crops. We are literally talking to their leader, Queen Sphene, who is explaining, like, how their technology works. And I just could not care any less. I don't know why anybody would. It just makes zero sense. Like, it's just wasting your time at this point. Like, this part, looking at the crops, like, it doesn't go on that long, don't get me wrong. It's not like 2 hours or anything, but I don't know, you could probably spend an hour here going through this part when, you know, there's a world-threatening issue going on overhead, literally looming over us at all times, to remind you, hey, you're wasting your time. You should go be doing, like, you should be doing something else right now. So, yeah, we're just kind of killing time here, and that'll be a recurring theme for the rest of the story, so keep that in mind, that when there's an immediate threat, we just like to go do something else that's very inconsequential. So we kill some time here, we learn about how this place works. I immediately predicted that Sphene would be the main problem here. She was just, you know, creepy and unsettling, and I don't know. I forget if we go into Solution 9 at this point, or do we go check out the rest of the zone? I'm pretty sure we go into Solution 9 first, but there is the rest of the zone here, which is kind of just a barren wasteland. There are some remnants of Alexandria over there in the distance. And at this point we start getting into the FF9 references, which are fine. They're in line with any other reference. It's not as heavy-handed as, you know, post-Endwalker was, but it's still just like, you know, nice little references here and there. The FF9 stuff is cool. But yeah, I don't know. This whole introduction to Heritage Found and to this dimension, if you want to call it that, this shard of Alexandria, it's just awful. Like, this whole outskirts zone is done in such a poor fashion where there is no pacing. It's like, we should not be spending as much time here as we are. And on that note, I'm just going to stop talking about it and move on, just like the writers should have done. Alright, next up we make our way inside Solution 9, which is like our end game hub zone. And this place is nice. It's a bit too utopian, dystopian for my taste. It's a little too clean, too empty. It's way too big. But, you know, it's cool. It's a nice, cozy zone, for sure. It's a nice city. And it's kind of grown on me a bit. I'll have to see how I feel about it by the end of the expansion. After hanging out in these neon lights for too long, it might cook my brain a bit. But, you know, showing up here, it's definitely meant to be a spectacle. We've never seen anything like this in the game before. And, you know, we get yet another tour of the area. We have to go walk around to every last little corner of the map, guided by Sphene the whole way. And I just very strongly dislike Sphene at this point because, man, I don't know. She's just such like a weird, out-of-place anime robot. That was the vibe that I was getting from the start, and lo and behold, she turns out to be basically a big AI at the end. And I don't know. Like, the zone is nice, the music's nice. Same sentiment that I have for every other zone, every other piece of music in the game. The story just felt like, yet again, it was wasting our time though, because we do learn a lot of the backstory here. We learn about all of their soul usage and their regulators, I believe they were called, the things on their head. I totally forgot to talk about Kefkiwa as well when we were out in Heritage Found, who turns out to be Erenville's mom, leader of the resistance up against Zoral Ja. And, you know, she didn't really have much going on until this point anyway. She was just kind of introduced that she's in a robot body for some reason, but it's still Erenville's mom. You know, there's some more details. I'm not going to go over every last thing in the effort to keep this, you know, somewhat short. But, I mean, I could go on forever if we go into every last detail. But, yeah, I don't know. We basically just go on a guided tour of Solution 9. And I think, like, it's another instance where the story and the concept is really cool. Don't get me wrong. Like, the whole thing with the souls, they're questioning mortality, questioning, like, some real philosophical stuff here. Like, the morals of, is it okay to create this afterlife, to erase memories of people who have passed away? And it's presented to you like, yeah, it is, because it's their society, and, you know, don't worry about it. So, I don't know. You can, if you connected with this point, or this part, then that's great. I think, like, it's a really cool concept to think about, but at the same time, it was just done in such a bad way, honestly. Like, I was already checked out at this point, to be fair. This did not pull me back in enough. The pacing of this zone, like, again, we still have that looming threat of Zoral Ja just waiting at the top of the tower for us. You know, we're just kind of going around eating some snacks and taking a tour of the area. It's, you know, necessary setup at this point because, like, we do need to get the understanding of what we're getting into here. We need to learn how this place works, so it's not the most egregious pacing that we've seen. It's better than the last two sections in Shalani and Heritage Found. And obviously the novelty of this place really just carries it for me. But, you know, after working our way through this zone, I forget, there might have been some other details that I'm leaving out, but we basically then ascend the tower. We actually go out and talk to Otis beforehand, who is a robot back out in the outskirts, out in Heritage Found. And honestly, I feel like I connected with Otis the robot more so than any other character in the story. I feel like he had such a strong character in the very short time that we knew him. And, you know, it was just an interesting little bit. Like, I feel like I found the most emotional connection with him. We eventually come back into Solution 9 with him and baby Golul Ja, who is fine, I guess. It's a funny little cute character. Goofy little baby Mamook Ja, who ends up being the son of Zoral Ja. I really don't know how to feel about that. I can take it or leave it. But, yeah, it's something. So we meet him out with Otis. They cook us a meal, they tell us a little bit about some history. And we just get a nice little connection there. We come back in and Zoral Ja, I believe, I'm a bit hazy on this part, but there's some sort of fight with his forces in here. And we end up going through that, and at the end, just after meeting Otis, he is basically killed off at the end of that fight scene. And that was honestly such a powerful moment in the story because we got to play it out. It wasn't a cutscene, it was a solo instance. I wish they had done that for all of the other major points of contention throughout the story, because this one turned out so good. Like, it was such a highlight when we're fighting through the troops in the streets of Solution 9. We end up at the food court where Otis is holding out his last stand to protect his queen. And we kind of have to fight him off and then fight that, like, electrope dog thing that eventually ends up killing Otis. And that was the most I felt for a character in this entire story. Which, we knew him for like 45 minutes, and he was killed off immediately, and that was the most meaningful part of the entire Dawntrail for me. So I don't know why I felt a connection with him, probably just because he was a cool robot guy who was an obvious reference to Steiner from FF9. And, you know, that's whatever. I can take or leave that. But I just thought he was cool. He had a lot of personality, which is something that can't be said for many of the characters in Dawntrail. I feel like we were just lacking a whole lot of personality, and he had it in spades. But it was just taken away from us immediately. But it was a powerful moment, and I am okay with how that played out. Honestly, I think that was absolutely one of the highlights of the entire story for me. That instance, or the solo instance with Otis here. And after that, we then go into, I believe it's the 99 dungeon, Origenics, to climb the tower and make our way up to where Zoraal is hiding. So another good dungeon. There's some weird dungeon pulls in there, but we won't get into all that. It was fine. It was still a very fun dungeon with fun bosses, fun combat. Really just excellent dungeon design, as has been the new standard in Dawntrail. So I can't complain there. We make our way to the top, fight Zoraal, beat him, obviously, because we're the Warrior of Light, and, you know, he's just a lizard man, so he's got some fancy tech on him, but he proves to be no match, and, yeah, that's, the end of him. It was kind of anticlimactic, in my opinion. Obviously, it had some cool build-up with the dungeon with the music, and, you know, the boss fights leading up to him. It was still cool, don't get me wrong, and obviously it was nice to take a break from the tedious story, the slog of going through the story of this expansion, to actually fight a boss, because we hadn't had one since level 93, and now we're at 99, which was the same deal in Endwalker. It went from 83 to 89 before we had a trial, before we saw the second trial. So same deal here, but it just felt like it was way more drug out in this one. And yeah, it was just kind of a relief to be done with that, honestly. So that kind of wraps up my thoughts about Solution 9. It's pretty, but it kind of lacks substance. It's, you know, obviously beautiful. Like, look at it. It's a little over the top for me. It's very stereotypically vaporwave, synthwave look. I wish we had some synthwave tracks playing in the background throughout some of this. The music for Zoraal's fight was awesome. It was very, like, Doom inspired. Mick Gordon, like, heavy guitars and, like, weird electronic riffs going on. So, like, don't get me wrong, there are still a lot of, like, awesome highlights for the story, and just hanging out here in Solution 9 has been a vibe for sure. But yeah, that's kind of it, and we're on to our last zone with the defeat of Zoraal. Alright, finally, we've made it to the final zone, and Living Memory is my least favorite part of Dawntrail. And man, this was rough. Keep in mind, we are level 99, level 100 going through this zone. As soon as we come in, we are faced with Fiend, who has... This whole zone is like a computer simulation, seemingly, of an area where it's basically digital heaven, where everybody's memories go to live forever in the afterlife. And Sphene is trying to fuse this dimension with our own and basically steal the life force of everybody in our dimension, if I remember correctly. That sounds pretty right. It was something like that. Some, you know, universal threat to our existence. So we come in here knowing that, and we have the ability to go to these different terminals to turn off the computer simulation here. We can basically just go pull the plug immediately. However, The story feels the need to completely and utterly waste our time when the computer is making preparations to fuse dimensions imminently. We are going around talking to all of the NPCs, trying out virtual popcorn, finding some virtual NPC's wedding ring that he lost. We are putting on a play for the virtual children before unplugging them and deleting them from existence, of course. We want them to have some good last moments, I guess. We're going through talking to all of the townspeople here in beautiful Las Vegas. We get a look at the Bellagio fountain. We get to go through the streets of Venice here. You know, and then we turn it off, pull the plug. Obviously, now you're seeing it post-game, where the entire zone is dead and lifeless, which sums up my thoughts and feelings after the story. It's a very good personification of that. But beforehand, this entire zone is basked in a golden light. This is the city of gold, after all. But we just go around chatting with people. We've got all the time in the world. There's not an imminent threat looming overhead yet again while we kill time. Again, we are level 99, level 100 at this point, depending on how much you leveled, depending what quest you're on. But yeah, let's just go hang out at the circus over here. Let's kill some more time. You know, there's no urgency. There's no severity to all of the time spent invested in our character up until this point. I get that it's a new expansion, it's a new story, but if they wanted low stakes, in my opinion, they should have reset our level. We shouldn't be level 100, taking a frolic through the park. That's just my opinion. This felt like a colossal waste of time. This was the most insultingly bad pacing of any part of this game that I have ever seen in any expansion. I am impartial to the Disney World Las Vegas aesthetic of this place. It's something I don't really care for in real life. It's a little much for me. I'm not a big theme park enjoyer. And that's what this place came across as, for sure. So we go through like 3 different areas in this zone, turning off the different terminals. The first one's pretty cut and dry. We just talk to a few NPCs, then pull the plug on all of them, deleting them from existence, erasing their memories. And then I believe we come here next, which is where we actually meet Kryle's parents. Kryle had absolutely no meaningful impact to the story until level 100 here. Maybe level 99, I forget exactly the number on the quest. But, yeah, I don't know. She has a very awkward meet with her parents. They talk about some stuff, I guess. And, I feel like they did Kryle dirty. It's a shame that she didn't get a more fleshed out story. She didn't get a meaningful talk with her parents. It was immediately interrupted by Graha in, like, goofily, is that a word? Eating ice cream in a goofy manner, where to break the tension, we have to go literally on a fetch quest to find ice cream cones at level 99, and it is just so insultingly bad at this point. My time is being completely wasted. I am so checked out at this point. And, man, like, I just wish they leaned more into the interesting story bits, because this is like a cool concept, but it's just ruined by us having to do fetch quests for random NPCs that aren't even real people. We're about to pull the plug on them and delete them forever. So I'm inclined to not feel an attachment to them. Like, I don't want to feel attached to them, because I know immediately after their quest, we are coming to this terminal and deleting them, deleting their memories and deleting them from existence. So it's like, man, this place just... I get that it's supposed to be this dystopian future. It's supposed to be depressing. Like, look at this place at this point in the story after, you pull all the plugs. But Kryle's parents, I'll leave that up to you. Again, there are some very strong, like, family themes of loss. And if you connect with those and felt emotional, by all means, like, don't let me take that away from you. I personally didn't, but especially the next area in this zone with Kefkiwa and Erenville, I feel like it was handled terribly, but it's still, like, I can see why people would be emotional over that, of course. Like, if you connect with that, it is tragic. But I personally didn't. I felt like even leading up until then, we were wasting our time. Like, Erenville is there being forced to come to terms with his mother's death, and we are just off gallivanting, putting on a play. Like, Wuklamot dresses up as a knight in this play and is like doing this horrible acting, and Erenville's just sitting there brooding in the corner. His mom just died, like, you know, a day ago in the outside dimension. Like, he is literally coming to terms with his mother's death, and we are just hanging out having a good old time. And there's also this looming threat in the sky that's about to fuse our dimensions and end life as we know it. But, you know, let's go for a walk with Erenville's mom through this garden, because she wants to ride Capybara through the sky. It just makes no sense. Like, I'm not even upset about it. I was just done at this point. Like, I didn't care. I didn't want to finish the story. It didn't matter what happened next. It was just over before this zone finished for me. And it did not redeem itself in any fashion. Like, this whole zone just was insulting to our time as a player. It's not what we should have been doing at level 99, level 100 at the finality of this story. It felt very insulting to Erenville's character. He got no meaningful character development. He had a nice little conversation with his mom at the end, but this whole time we were in this zone, like, I felt so bad for him, and the writers of this story just pushed him into the corner while we were off doing other stuff where we should have been talking to him and, like, diving into that emotional story, because, like, that was actually really deep and meaningful. Like, his mom got time traveled into this, because I believe she was on the train when the dome formed out in Heritage Found, and, like, that only happened like a few days ago in our time, but she's been in here for like 30 years her time. And man, it's just like Erenville has to come to terms with that in like an instant, but we basically just ignore it and don't address that for some reason. And that seemed like the biggest misstep of this entire zone to me. Like, I can look past all the other stuff, the bad pacing, the fetch quests, the absolute nonsense that we had to go through at the very end of this story. But, like, doing that to him and his character, like, he just did not deserve that, in my opinion. And this zone is just left lifeless. And, like I said before, it's just such a good representation for this game's story, for the writing. This feels like the husk of the former self of what was A Realm Reborn to Endwalker. This zone personifies my thoughts on Dawntrail in comparison to what it used to be. I don't know. It's rough, man. I feel like I hate having to make this video. I just need to get all this off my chest. Honestly, like, I've been thinking about this for weeks now. And it's genuinely, like, made me upset that the story went in this direction. Oh, I just wish it was better. And again, there's some really cool concepts, some cool themes here. The story itself is not bad, but it is absolutely ruined and tarnished by the structure of the MSQ in this game. And again, like, it's a bit of a weaker story than past expansions, because they've all had the same structure. It feels worse in this expansion than it did in previous ones, because there was always like a finale in all the previous expansions, I don't think there is in this one. We go, turn all the terminals off, we go into the final tower, get our last dungeon in Alexandria, which, granted, is an amazing dungeon. But yeah, it's just another dungeon with very little context. And then we fight Sveen, who is a giant robot for some reason. I guess just to give us a giant robot fight. The fight itself was really cool, but the worst part about it is the phase 2, when Urqopacha flies in out of the sky. She breaks a hole through the ceiling and literally jumps in, has some terrible voice acting, and steals the show, gets the kill steal in the end, takes all of the glory, and the one thing that we were gonna help with, she's just gotta butt in and take that away from us. So at the end of the day, looking back on it, I hate Urqopacha as a character. I started out loving her, and my opinion of her just went down and down and down and down and further down, and then I started running some duty support dungeons where she was the tank, and she wouldn't pull the mobs close together, and I was just getting so pissed. Like, oh man, I don't care about this stuff. I'm not a big story person, but man, did I really have some strong feelings about her towards the end. Like, her character's fine. They just put her into the story at such inopportune times when they needed room for everything else to breathe. And she is just forced upon you time and again. And you're just left feeling like you want to get away from her at every corner of this story. I don't know what else there is to say about this. Again, I don't think the story itself was bad. I think the way that it was presented was bad. The MSQ is the problem here. It's not the story. Those are two very separate things. So, it is what it is. The final trial, I'm excited for EX3 for sure. That's going to be sick. The music was awesome. There were some crazy looking mechanics in that fight. Again, everything that's not the story, everything that's not the MSQ is incredible in Dawntrail. I love it all so much. I've been having so much fun with this game. I've been playing it every single day since it launched. But man, the MSQ falls flat for me. And if it weren't for this YouTube channel, I would be a story skipper after this. I have lost so much respect for this game's story, for what they have done in the past. Obviously, everything they've done in the past still holds up. Everything up until the end of Endwalker was great. But man, my expectations for the patches could not be any lower at this point. I'm gonna hold out hope. They really need to come out swinging at the launch of 6.1 or 7.1 with the next patch in the post-MSQ story for Dawntrail. They left off with some interesting stuff. We did have hints at the end that the key to the Golden City, to the dimensional travel, had some tie-ins with Azem, so that was kind of a loose end that was left open at the end of Endwalker. We don't really know that much about Azem. I'm not the lore guy. I'm not the one to ask about all the deep story stuff. I just know how I feel going through it. So I had a bad time with this MSQ. It was rough. I wanted to stop playing and start skipping cutscenes pretty early on. And I hit a real wall in this last zone, which is incredibly unfortunate. So, there we have it. I honestly don't know how to feel or what to think about this. Maybe I'm just done with MSQ in this game after going through the past, what, 5 expansions worth of content and reading all the quests and all the dialogue and watching all the cutscenes. Maybe I've just had my fill. Maybe I'm being too harsh on this. But Dawntrail's MSQ just wasn't for me. I think it was a huge misstep not including all of our favorite characters in a more prominent role in this story. Like, sure, we had some of them show face here and there, but they had like 3 lines of dialogue. If you're not going to include them, at least kill them off and do it in a meaningful way, an impactful way. Maybe a hot take, maybe not a good idea, but you know, it would be better than them just not showing up ever again. So at least get some closure, right? I don't know. I don't know what to think about Dawntrail. It's, we'll see what happens with the patches, I guess, but let me know. Did you like Dawntrail's story? Did you like the MSQ experience? Are you fed up with all the fetch questing, all of the talk to Urqopacha, all of the talk to 3 NPCs? I know I sure am. I can't take it anymore. I think this format of MSQ needs to change. I don't think it's the story that killed it for me. I think it's just all of the tedious questing and the terrible pacing. I do think this was some of the weaker writing, some of the weaker character development that we've seen, some of the least urgency in the MSQ we've ever had, with no real motives or issues to solve. Our character serves no purpose in the story. Urqopacha's annoying. Smile is the worst song this game has ever had. And to ruin this Solution 9 theme for you, this is just lo-fi Smile. All I can hear are the Disney lyrics over this lo-fi beat whenever I'm in Solution 9 now. It's got the same melody going. Oh man. Oh, I don't know. It's I love this game. I don't love the MSQ, that's for sure. Maybe I'm just a skipper moving forward. Let me know, what was your favorite part? What was your least favorite part? Did you like the story? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comments. Let me know if I'm completely off base here, or if I'm on the money. But, this was fun talking about. I just needed to vent about this, to, rant about it for a minute. I know this has been a long video, so thank you for watching if you're still here. And, yeah, we'll see you in the patches, I guess. I probably won't be making more MSQ videos. I just had to get this out there, share some thoughts. But if you like this, be sure to sub to the channel. We'll be back to our more regularly scheduled content moving forwards. We got Savage in a week here, so I'm super excited. Be sure to head on over to Twitch if you want to watch any of the Savage prog. Be sure to drop me a follow over there because I'm going to be going hard on that for the first week or two at least, see how far we can get, and try to clear that tier as soon as possible. So that's going to do it for this video. Thank you for watching. I'm sorry if you didn't want to listen to me complain about Dawntrail for an hour and a half or however long this has been, but here we are, and that's going to do it for me today. So I'll catch you in the next one. Have a good one. Peace.